turn the lights off to cut the power bill a little.
All right. Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to note Deputy Mayor Owens is here. She can certainly answer questions if anyone has any. We also have our Chief Operating Officer, Connor Muldoon, here. I've said pretty much all there is to say at this point. Needless to say, I'm disappointed but not surprised by the council's actions today. I think they had been signaling that this was going to be the outcome for quite a while. I think it's telling that almost 3 weeks since the council first made their amendments, there has been ample time for further public dialogue, debate, discussion, and there was virtually none. And so, even from the time that I issued my vetoes, still time for dialogue, discussion, debate, and they chose to remain silent. So again, disappointing, not surprising. But that's where we are. So now we go about the business of running city government. So we've got just about a month until the beginning of the next fiscal year. I met with, we have a weekly department head meeting. So last week I asked all department heads to begin developing their contingency budgets based on the council's budget. And I want to be clear, this is the council's budget. I delivered my budget. Council held hearings on my budget. And there has been zero public dialogue about the amendments that the council made. So this is the council's budget. I've asked department heads to develop their plans per the council's budget. That is in process. We're going to meet again tomorrow, discuss that further. The goal is next week to sit down and review draft budgets, draft contingency budgets. We'll make any final amendments or changes, I should say. And unlike the council's process, we do intend to be very transparent and open with what those decisions are. We will share those publicly with the media as well as our constituents, and we'll also share those with the council. And to the council, I would say if there are any cuts that they don't like, just as they've had the opportunity throughout this process to offer alternatives, I encourage them to offer them going forward. But up to this point, they have offered none. So that's where we are, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you have a timeline for when you start announcing some of these impacts?
Yeah.
I mean, it may be some here and there.
Yeah, I'd say probably within the next 2 weeks, we will have solidified our contingency budgets, and I will share those cuts publicly as soon as we have that ready. So before the beginning of the fiscal year on July 1st.
Mayor, with respect to the transparency from the Common Council, you're clearly not pleased with the way things have gone.
Yeah.
But have you explored in any way any legal action to see if what they did actually constituted doing something illegal?
I haven't, Connor. Again, I think that the budget process is what it is. It's laid out in the charter. It's the same every year. So any suggestion that the council has felt, rushed by it, again, they know what it is, and they've taken the necessary actions to be in compliance with the budget. We've talked about the open meetings law, and again, that's I'm not an attorney, but I think so. Whether or not they followed the letter of the law relative to the budget is not in question. Whether or not they followed the letter of the law on open meetings law and transparency, again, I would defer to the legal experts. What is indisputable is that what they did is not good governance. They are elected, each of them, to represent their constituents. They did not give their constituents any opportunities to be informed about the cuts that they made, to discuss them, to debate them. And so, again, the budget process was followed to the letter of the law, but this is not good governance, and there were plenty of opportunities where they could have done better.
You say you're deferring to lawyers. You have lawyers on
Yeah.
your team, unless
No, I do.
Yeah,
That's a fair point.
I'm wondering. I mean, the Post Standard invoked it publicly that the council may have violated. Their editorial board said that they may have violated open meetings law. I just wonder.
Corporation Counsel has not come to that opinion. So I think
Do they
that
dispute the opinion?
I think they acknowledge there's some gray area there. But I don't have I did not get a clear indication of, partly because we don't know exactly what's being discussed, right? I think that's a big part of the determination about whether or not it violates open meetings laws. Are they discussing, are they going through the council agenda and going and having discussions that should be had in public? Those are the types of things that I think ultimately would determine it. So it's not clear to me based on what I've heard from Corporation Counsel.
Will they look for clarity on that? Will your lawyers look for clarity on that and decide the next step, or is that just not really what you're interested in?
Well, I mean, again, I think that they based on what they know, they have advised that the council is not in violation of open meetings law. But again, I think if they were to know exactly what was being discussed, they may come to a different conclusion. But there's really no way to know that. Again, regardless, it's not good governance.
Speaking of good governance, Councilor Majuk is accusing you of being a bit too emotional in your initial response to their announcement on how they were cutting the budget, and that impacted their ability to feel that they could compromise with you. Do you have any regret with the way that initial press conference was held?
No, because I was communicating openly to the media, to my constituents, and I wish that Councilor Majuk and his colleagues had done the same. And Councilor Majuk, I find it, I don't know if ironic is the right word, but certainly questionable that the first time Councilor Majuk enters the chat to weigh in on the budget is I see a letter to the editor posted online literally as he's voting. And in that letter, he talks about being an adult in the room. Adults communicate. Adults compromise. Adults work with their constituents, with their colleagues. Nothing about the way in which Councilor Majuk has handled himself in this process suggests that he's the adult in the room. Adults do their homework. There are just factual inaccuracies in that letter. I presented as part of my budget presentation and then followed up with additional information to the council, I presented information that clearly showed that our current fiscal stability and our annual performance on our budget is not overly impacted by ARPA, or was not overly impacted by ARPA. He very simply and wrongly chalks up all of our fiscal progress to ARPA. I've shared it once. I'm going to share some facts again. So over the last 3 budget years that ARPA did not become a factor in the budget until fiscal year 22. In fiscal year 22, when you remove the ARPA funds that were used in the budget, we had almost a $15 million surplus without ARPA. With ARPA, it was $36 million. Without ARPA, $14.9 million surplus. In fiscal year 23, $4 million surplus without ARPA. I question whether or not Councilor Majuk even read what we presented him because he was just wrong. So don't lecture me on being an adult in the room.
The statement, I don't know if you've seen the statement the council put out today.
I have not seen it. Shockingly, Jeremy, they did not share that with me.
But just to, I wanted to ask your reaction, sort of started to address it there. One of the sentences is, if we did not have the federal safety net that COVID relief provided, the city would be completely out of its savings and unable to balance.
It's just wrong, Jeremy. I mean, they say things that sound good that are not based in reality. The first year of the pandemic, without ARPA, we made in very close coordination with the Common Council, where they were literally involved in the decision-making process. Because of that contingency budget that we developed with the council, we had a $40 million surplus without ARPA. And I just went through where ARPA was involved. So I covered fiscal year 22 without ARPA, $14.9 million surplus. Fiscal year 23 without ARPA, $4.1 million surplus. Fiscal year 24, last fiscal year, without ARPA, $365,000 deficit. So again, adults do their homework.
So when will city residents feel this? The 1st of July, or will it take a while? Or?
Yeah, I mean, technically the 1st of July. We'll certainly take a look at what the last few weeks of the fiscal year look like, whether or not there are any impacts. I don't anticipate there will be, but we're going to communicate before the 1st of July. But yeah, from the beginning, those cuts are going to be felt. But again, we are going to do everything in our power to mitigate the impact of those cuts, both on services and people. We're going to think long and hard about the council's offer to go back and ask for more money. I think it's a disingenuous offer if the goal is really to rein in spending. But it's they seem to be very quick to offer that. Certainly when they heard from upset department heads, they said, "Don't worry, just come back. We'll give you more." We might take them up on that. But I take my job very seriously, and we were given a budget that we are going to try to manage towards. But in some cases, we may have to come back, and they've certainly suggested they would be willing to entertain that.
Sorry to cut you off. I think you waited until this point to really share what versus what gets cut, right?
Yeah, we're just not there yet, Andrew.
Still, okay.
We're not. No, again,
Just shot spotters.
don't to be determined, but it is absolutely on the chopping block. Beginning next week, I will see draft budgets from every department, and then I will take that opportunity to determine what I want to change. But as I've said from the beginning, there will be cuts, there will be pain. I'm going to do what I can to minimize it.
Given concerns about transparency and some of the barbs that have been thrown back and forth between yourself and some members of the council, can neighbors in Syracuse be confident that their common council and their mayor are able to work together right now?
They can be confident that they have a mayor and administration that takes our jobs very seriously and has a track record of the past 7.5 years of effectively managing city finances and city operations. They can be confident in the fact that their mayor, despite many challenges and not always having ready and willing partners, in spite of everything that we've been through in this budget process, I still talk to counselors. I reach out to them. I will continue to, so they can be confident that I will continue to operate as mayor the same way I've done in the past 7.5 years. And again, that's effectively managing the city, and it's being a good collaborator and communicator. I can't speak for the council, but I think the council's actions over the past few weeks speak for themselves.
Can you even trust a single counselor? I mean, not one of them in public forum brought up a question, a comment, a challenge to where the leadership was headed. Not one person.
I try really hard to put myself in their shoes, and that's just something that I do when I'm addressing problems. I try to put myself in our constituents' shoes and our counselors' shoes. I think I've never operated on a legislative body. It's a different dynamic, and I think that there's a lot of pressure to stay with the group. And I think some counselors felt that pressure and ultimately relented to that pressure. I still have a lot of respect for individual council members, some certainly more than others, but I think by and large, most are trying to do the right thing. But I think that there was a lot of pressure, both in terms of the group dynamics and as well as politics too. I mean, you have two mayoral candidates that are clearly being influenced by politics. They have colleagues that are supporting them that probably feel pressure to stand behind them. And look, I understand that politics is a part of this process, but politics is a means to an end. The end is to serve our constituents and to be responsive to our constituents. I'm afraid that politics has been the end for more than a couple counselors in this process.
Well, I'm sure you're not surprised that the only two counselors who are willing to speak on camera today are both candidates for mayor. The others have deferred to leadership.
Yeah.
What do you think got a hold of some of these other counselors? They won't even defend their decision on camera with us.
Yeah, I don't know, Andrew. I don't know.
Very disturbed. This is your last 7 months in office, and you kind of got this cloud over you after still 7.5 years of happiness in life.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd put it that way, Ellen, but I mean, look, the reality is it's never been easy. I didn't expect it to be easy. I mean, you look back at some of the major challenges that we've gone through from the pandemic to the murder of George Floyd and the public unrest that went along with that. and so on and so forth. There's been a lot of disruptions. But again, what I'm proud of looking back on the past 7.5 years is we've navigated those waters, we've weathered the storms, and we've delivered for our constituents. So I expect that's going to be the case here. As I've said, it didn't have to be this hard, but the council as a co-equal member of this process has made it more difficult than it needs to be. But I have an incredible amount of confidence and respect for our team. That again, going back to the point about, the way I reacted when the council voted, that was driven in large part by the reactions of my department heads who just felt disrespected. They go above and beyond for their constituents and for the council, and they felt really slighted that they didn't even get the courtesy of a conversation. So, I'm going to be working hand in hand with them, and again, I'm confident that with the team we have in place, we'll be okay.
Mayor, when you last provided us with the breakdown of how the cuts may, affect each department's budget, flag safety was another technology that was
Yeah.
to the police. I asked Councilor Hogan if he thought that was a reality, a realistic thing that, because he keeps saying,
Yeah.
you can just go ask for more money.
Yeah.
Councilor Hogan seems to think that the block LPRs will remain in Syracuse. And I just wonder what you make of that.
Did he render an opinion on it, or?
He just kept saying he thinks that we'll see that they'll remain, I guess implying that he'll provide additional funding if the city requests it. I just wonder, again, what do you make of that sort of budgeting?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what is going through Councilor Hogan's head, but he doesn't run the police department. Chief Cecil does, and I do, and ultimately that's where the decisions are going to be made. But I just find it incredibly frustrating that that Councilor Hogan minimizes the impact of these cuts and very kind of I'm struggling with the words on this one, but it's I'm at a loss on this one. I'm sorry.
If ShotSpotter and the license plate readers or any other police tech is cut as a result of the council's cuts.
Yeah.
You established a procedure for implementing these technologies.
Yeah.
Do you feel that would in some way be the council sort of removing your legacy on your way out?
I don't think about my legacy. I think about the people that we serve, and but again, I think that you mentioned the process. So I established a surveillance technology group. That didn't exist, and that inserted another layer into the decision-making process that allowed for additional public engagement and the receipt of public feedback. And so, it's just another example of how these cuts and the way in which they were done undermines the things that the council and Councilor Hogan allegedly values in transparency and accountability. But again, I think the point that I wanted to make, which I've made a million times, is you can't say that you can't make very difficult cuts, then suggest that the departments have flexibility to move money around when they spend all of their budget. And then if you concede that, which seemingly Councilor Hogan did in this case, and then say, well, you can come back and ask for more, then what's the point? What is the point of all of this? And that I can't answer that question.
As the outgoing mayor, you'll lead with a breadth of experience.
Yeah.
Real world experience. What would you advise a future mayor and or a future council to consider in terms of procedural, structural, maybe charter changes that would have been helpful the past month or so?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question, Andrew. I think outside of structural, it's just communicate. We have 7.5 years worth of evidence that show that when you communicate and collaborate, you govern well. And so, again, the fact that didn't happen in this case is unfortunate. But in terms of structural changes, I think that the fact that that the process, there isn't a formal step in the process that allows for additional public engagement after the council makes their amendments is a missed opportunity and maybe an opportunity for improvement. So that's something that, that we have tossed around some ideas and may pursue before I'm done as mayor.
As a charter level change, or?
I would think so, but I mean, look, there was nothing stopping the council from holding a public hearing at any point in this process. And the fact that they didn't, I think, is telling. But by pursuing it through a charter change, that would certainly, require the council to do it, and that may be what's necessary.
When reporters have asked why a public hearing wasn't held, the councilors maintained that they held over 40 public hearings.
Right.
They had, what do you make of that as far as an effort to involve the public in the budget process?
Yeah, I mean, again, that was all done before the council made any amendments or even had made any indication that the scale and scope of the amendments that they made were being actively under consideration. So I think it's disingenuous. They very easily could have created more opportunities after those amendments. But the budget hearings, that they've got 30 days or so. They can ask any questions that they want. They can make any comments they want. Oftentimes they devolve into what about this, or hey, what about my constituent issue here or there. I think there's a process for the council to be much more thoughtful in how they go about those budget hearings, and also more thoughtful in how they go about soliciting feedback on any changes they make.
The politics has been raised a few times. If Deputy Mayor Owens, if you'd be able to take some questions. It's likely that two of your opponents in this race will market what's happened here as a positive for them. They went against the current administration, which arguably you're a face of continuing, given that Mayor Walsh is not able to run again. How do you respond if they're going to tout this as a victory for themselves on the campaign?
I don't know how you tout this as a victory. You completely ignored a public process. You're looking to be mayor of a city that has to be couched in constituent feedback. And you completely did not follow a process that included the voices of the people. So I don't really see how you can tout this as a victory. One individual says the departments can figure it out. Councilor Hogan says the departments can figure it out. When asked by you, what would you cut? Oh, I don't know. I'm not a department head. Exactly. Which is why you should have engaged with the people you go to run those departments. Councilman Joke's talking about being the adult in the room. You are the chair of the Committee of Public Safety and didn't have one conversation with the two chiefs that run those departments. So I don't think it's a victory. I don't think it's a victory at all. It is not just a peek. The curtains are drawn on your governance style, which is not mine.
Anything else?
Note, moving forward, if we live in a world where the original budget was maintained, given that a lot of what we talked about today are some of the transparency issues, when it comes to the claim from them that the $27 million deficit was simply too much, that the method of spending simply wasn't going to work, as you make your plan for 4 or possibly 8 years in that office, were you looking to at some point curtail, each year the budget going up?
I mean, obviously we have to take a look at that. The other part of this conversation is, where are we actually going to be able to draw revenue, additional revenue? The other thing is that we cannot lose any tax base. So as we grow as a city, the mayor has to keep an eye on our tax base and making sure we're not losing that. Less than half of us are responsible for paying the entire tax bill for the city. So ensuring that happens. But also something that we had talked about that I will absolutely start out the gate is establishing a revenue committee to really look at how we can generate revenue in this city. It's tough. It's hard to throw up letters to the editor or I'm going to make sure that we don't run a deficit. How? There clearly is amount of money that needs to run a city. The question is, how much is that? But there clearly is a deficit because we don't earn enough revenue. So it's easy to just throw out arbitrary statements about whether or not I'm going to make sure that we don't run a deficit. The rainy day fund is there for that purpose. It is a conversation about responsibility about how we go about getting there. We could have ended up at $16 million of a cut. I think how we ended up at this day has been determined by the process laid out by the council.
I could just add just a couple of points to that. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to remind folks that that Councilor Hogan and Councilor Majuk have approved all of the budgets in recent years that they were a part of. So to disassociate themselves from that process or disown it is, again, disingenuous. They approved the budgets. To the Deputy Mayor's point about revenue, they've offered zero revenue opportunities, not even ideas. So again, to feign urgency around fiscal sustainability, I think is disingenuous when you look at what their actual track record is. Forgive me for continuing to refer to the spreadsheet in front of me here, but I talked about the surpluses that we've gained. Last year, the current fiscal year, our budgeted fund draw is $19.25 million. At worst, we're going to draw about half of that based on where we are and based on the numbers that I've seen. We'll draw half of that. And at best, we could end up balancing the budget this year. So I understand the $27 million number is scary, but if you take the time to do your homework, to review the vast amount of information and data that we regularly share with the counselors, which they often ignore, what you would see is consistently us spending much less than we budget for. You've all heard me say, you budget for a worst case scenario and you manage towards the best. And this administration has a track record of managing very positive outcomes, both operationally and fiscally for city government. And I have no doubt that we will do the same this year, regardless of the council's cuts. I'm just repeating myself at this point. So thank you all for the time and attention. I really appreciate it.